6:16, coming up about 6:17 in Trinidad and Tobago. Already got a polite buff this morning for chewing up some of the time for our first guest for our first segment, because we want to focus on the issue of the school environment and violence and so on. We're going to chat with the second vice president of TTUTA, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. She is Kyrla Robertson-Thomas, and indeed this discussion about a national school code of conduct, as was raised by the Minister of Education yesterday. Ms. Robertson-Thomas, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Lots of issues on the table, and we'd like to get your perspectives and, of course, TTUTA's perspective on these situations. Before we talk about the broader issue of violence, your perspective on a national schools code of conduct, what's your view on that? Good morning to you, first of all.
Good morning to you. Good morning to your viewers. Fazir, there's always been a National School Code of Conduct. In fact, it was revised in about 2018, and all stakeholders involved in education were part of that revision of the document. The document is something that has to be shared. The Ministry of Education does have it on its Facebook page, and all schools were sent a digital copy when the revision was done. It's supposed to be shared to parents, to students, to civil staff, to teachers, to everybody, because it encompasses how everybody who occupies the school's compound should treat with each other. And there's also some matrix at the back to assist administrators in developing further matrices to deal with indiscipline and so at schools. So it is something that we are accustomed to, and it provides guidance. What we might say is that it is not widely known of, and a lot of the times it's only the school officials have it. But if you're going to bound the students by their behavior and parents with the expectations of what they have to do, then they have to be made aware that it is there. So everybody should know how they to conduct themselves.
Well, you've precluded my next question, so let me just try and squeeze it in very quickly. Is it actually, obviously you've answered the first part of my question, that not everyone would be aware of it, but shouldn't it be properly and fully implemented if it's something that has already been agreed to?
That's part of the drawback. In prior years, the ministry would print hard copies. There were larger versions and there were pocket-sized versions that were sent out. Of course, they would have talked about the economy and not being able to make copies, so it was sent digitally at the last occasion to the schools. So it depends on the schools who send it out, but most times we try to encourage our members to ensure that everybody receives a copy, digital or otherwise, because I can't be bound by something that I don't know of. So maybe a little greater emphasis has to be placed on the Ministry of Education in ensuring that each household gets a copy of the document so that they can do so. What I do know is that some principals, when they have their parent meetings, they also go through the sections that apply to students, to parents, and so on. The problem with that is that not all parents attend school conferences, and so we don't get everybody. In fact, teachers will tell you the ones that you want to see are usually the ones that do not turn up to such meetings. So that's where our problem lies, really. But the ministry, I mean, we're not always here to rub swords with the ministry. They have been displaying it on their Facebook page and in other places so that people can access it. So
I mean, we want to get to the issue, but just quickly on that, I'm sorry for taking so much time on this particular point, but wouldn't it make sense? And you know, with these voluminous documents, I don't know anybody in the world who has time, a parent, to go through all these things. Isn't it something in the same way you have a vision and mission statement? Shouldn't it be like a few key points, whether it's 5 or 6 key points, to have just at either next to the blackboard or the whiteboard or whatever they call it now, or at the entrance into the school, just some key points of that national code of conduct that would be universally agreed upon? Wouldn't that make a bit of sense as well?
Well, visual learners, that will help to reinforce the points. Another way, as I said, is to send it home so parents get it regularly, and every term you keep repeating it, because there are a number of things in there. You might be able to put just a few as to what the students are expected to do, but there are a number of points on I don't know if you've seen the document yourself. You will have to rotate what you put out so that everybody cooperates and does their part.
Okay, I hear you on that.
Or maybe they should do reels or videos regularly now to blast parents and stakeholders so that it is always current.
No, and to answer your question, no, I haven't seen the document. And to be quite honest, reading through government documents or any kind of official document is a little tedious. And honestly, it's a struggle for me. But let's get to the issue of the violence situation. Of course, it is a lot of this reaction again has been triggered by that very troubling knife attack. The student has been expelled. There are now to be charges laid. We got some data from the minister yesterday identifying fights in specific schools, saying that there were just one so far for this week, for example. What's your perspective on this situation?
One fight a week is one fight too much. The school cannot by itself treat with that. We need all of society to work on how we curb that. Now, there are a number of issues that cause students to react in that way. Sometimes you end up with the person who was being bullied being the aggressor on an occasion, and that's the one that comes to the fore. That those things happen incrementally, but we need to focus on teaching our young people how to resolve differences without being violent. We also, as adults, and when I say adults, teachers, parents, caregivers, everybody in society, we need to listen more to our children. So when they come and they bring issues, they have that listening ear, and adults work towards a peaceful resolution. We don't want adults to jump in and help join into the violence. You know, sometimes you hear parents say, well, if they touch you, hit them back, you push them, you do whatever. We need to come away from that type of behavior. Now, the Student Support Division of the Ministry of Education, while they are working their best, we need to have more of them. So we don't need to have a social worker attached to 7 schools or a guidance officer attached to 7 schools. We need to come to a place where we have one of them stationed in a school, especially after 2 years of being online for Ziri. When we speak to our members, a lot of our students have come back to school more troubled than before because they were subject to abuse at their homes, various types of abuse, and that eventually causes problems in the school. Then they come to school, and sometimes because they live in the same community, other students may know of the types of abuse that they might have entered home, and then they come and they start to make a mockery of some of these students there. So the home environment always spills into the school.
So let me jump in right there, Mr. Ross. Sorry, excuse my rudeness for jumping in like that. But how do you deal with that then? Even before the pandemic and especially now after, where in the school environment, you are now called upon, whether the teacher, the principal, the support staff or whatever, to deal with problems that have come from home. How do you deal with that?
Well, it has always been what teachers have to do. We always know that we are counselors, we are doctors, nurses, parents, caregivers. You have to put down the curriculum. You have to stop teaching maths, language, grammar. And oftentimes you have to sit down and do a session with your students to encourage them to, one, share, and to, two, guide them towards help. Then as teachers, you have to fill out the paperwork once you recognize that a child is in problem, to refer them to the Student Support Division to get help to them. But that's what I'm saying. You can't have a guidance officer or a social worker being shared, because there's so many issues in schools that sometimes even when you do a referral, it takes a while for that specialized person who's trained in counseling and providing that support to get to that child or those children. So we need more effort there. We need to have a living in each school, so that as you've recognized them, you've done the paperwork, they can start to get more help than waiting for help to come. And then months go by, sometimes no fault of the officer is spread across 3 schools. And let me tell you what will happen. Where that fight happened down there, immediately they will remove other officers from other schools to all go to that school and treat with, because it's not just going to be the aggressor and the child that was injured, it will be all the children who were part of that issue, because I'm sure when they've done the investigation, there may have been other students who would have been involved in one way or another, even before the day of that unfortunate event, and they have to be worked with. So then some other school does not get the benefit of these officers while they are treating with that crisis situation.
And
So
just
there
on that
has
point,
to be.
yeah, and on that point, are you satisfied though? And quite clearly from what you're saying, and I got that from my own practical experience speaking to students in different school environments about how many counselors are actually there or the shortage thereof. Are these individuals, from your understanding or direct experience, sufficiently qualified and trained, and therefore, if more of them were to be in the school environment, as you say, one per school, or maybe depending on the school environment, more than one per school, that level of support would make a fundamental difference?
Yes, they are trained. Yes, they are well trained. They are qualified. There needs to be more of them introduced into the schools. TUTA has been advocating for many years for the schools to be equipped with a school nurse per school, and social workers and guidance officers, along with all the other members of the student support, school aides, etc. Those things create the problem we are talking about. I know you don't have much time, but when a child needs assistance to write, or a child is dyslexic and you don't have the special ed teacher, that is the same child who will start to give problems that the teacher sometimes cannot stop to deal with that individual child. And there may be 5 of such children in one class, but you are trying to keep up with the curriculum because you have to do a scheme. You have to break that down into what you do weekly in order to complete that for the term. So when these disruptions happen, you have to decide whether I'm going to go with the mass of the class or I'm going to stay to deal with those who need individualized attention. We don't have enough of these officers in schools. We simply do not have enough to give that attention to teachers. So teachers do a lesson plan to do their work with the general class. But when you have specialized children, you need a special ed teacher to come and do an IEP to work with those children who will have other needs. And those children eventually, when they start to get left behind, they become the distraction, they become provoking, they will start the fights, and add that to the children who are socially awkward or in homes that do not have proper mentors to help them know how they should behave and what is the behavior, positive behaviors to exhibit in a social setting. So you need the guidance officer, the social worker, the student aid, the special ed teacher, the nurse. We don't have enough of those. We have one nurse per district right now because of COVID, but not one nurse to school. Districts are long and broad. The St. George's district is from Barataria in the west to Arima in the east, and all the way up to Blanchisseuse at the north of the district, and Mando to Nuevo at the south. That's one district. Where this nurse is, how is she or he to react to all of the schools if we have issues in those schools? And it's the same for the other districts.
Ms. Robertson
One
Thomas,
nurse per district won't work. One guidance officer or social worker for 7 schools, you have to budget your time. I remember I was at a school that was considered special, and when I went there, I said, well, where's the social worker? That social worker was scheduled to be at that school only on a Friday. And many Fridays, sometimes they had other training and workshop, and she wouldn't get to service our school, not through her fault, but through the bureaucracy of the ministry. And it was a school that every Monday morning, somebody was trying to kill somebody with a stone, with a knife, with a something, because there were children with behavioral issues that required more attention. And that's one example. So teachers usually are, it's troubling now to see videos of fights. There was one where a teacher with a cane was in the middle who is using a cane, trying to prevent children from hurting themselves. Because at your job, you try to do what is best so that nobody is hurt. But what happens to the teacher who is not trained to treat, and these children are bigger than most of their teachers, and they're venomous. So you need to defuse that. We need to have ADR. We need to have the ability for students and teachers to learn how to diffuse situations better. And we need to be good examples. You and I, Fazzy, you have to be better examples to the society. We have to have our radio announcers. Sometimes we have to create what we want in the atmosphere and not create the noise and not hype up the negatives. And us as citizens have to stop sharing these videos, because then there will be no need for these children to tape this. Some of them who are taping it also instigate the fights further, and they're looking for their 2 minutes of fame, and we keep sharing and sharing and sharing. And for them, that's a popularity thing.
It
in
is,
this,
it is
this
indeed,
age of
Ms.
social
Robertson-Thomas.
media.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I mean, there's a whole shopping list of issues that you're raising, and I really hope that at another opportunity we can develop those points even further. And indeed, by the time the next academic year begins in a couple months' time, that we could see actually some movement in the right direction. But Ms. Robertson-Thomas, we want to thank you very much indeed for taking the time to just share some of those concerns that you have. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Remember, you need to make a plug to have TTUTA have its own program, so then you will have all the issues all the time, very current. We're always willing and able.
But once you find the sponsorship, we're good to go. Thanks very much for
We
that.
can work on that together.
Indeed, Kyrla Robertson-Thomas, the second vice
Have a good
president
day.
of TTUTA. But we might be smiling at the end, and we will be talking about their own program. But think about it. All of the issues that she would have raised in those last couple of minutes that she was trying to squeeze in so much information, they're all very relevant and very real. And have we really been dealing with them? But anyway, we have to move on because it's a really packed show this morning. Time to remind you of the COVID-19 protocols. Wear a mask over the nose and mouth when you go out in public. Keep your distance from others. Stay home if you're ill. Wash your hands with soap and water or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cough into a tissue or into the crook of your elbow. Avoid touching your face, and please sanitize those hard surfaces as often as possible. We'll be right back.